Hello and welcome to this short tutorial on the present tense in Spanish. Before we get started and look at depth at the present tense and how to form it, how to use it, it's really important that we look at some key terms that are associated with the present tense. So on the left hand side of the screen you've got some key terms. You've got subject pronoun, paradigm, verb, infinitive, conjugation, stem and endings. What I would like you to do is have a think about how you define each term and if you can give some examples of each one. Pause the video here while you do this. So let's start with subject pronouns. Pronouns in the most basic form replace a noun. So instead of saying the boys, I can say they. Instead of saying the girl, I can say she. And subject pronouns, they show us who is doing an action. And they take the likes of I, you, he, she, it, we, you plural, and they. When we're using subject pronouns, because they show us who's doing an action, different people can do an action. And sometimes the verb itself changes. So if we think of she plays versus they play. So that verb changes. And the paradigm arranges those subject pronouns into a specific order. And it also, when we look at tenses in Spanish, it organizes our endings into a specific order. So the paradigm is a specific order that shows us who is doing an action. Okay, it shows us exactly who's doing that action. And that order never ever changes. And the order is always I, you singular, he, she, it, we, you plural, and they. When you're given, for instance, endings to learn later on, that is the order in which they come. Now a verb. Verbs are often described as doing words, and I don't really like that because I don't think it fully encompasses what a verb is. A verb, for instance, can be I play, it can be they played, they are going to play, but it also is I am. So I like to think of verbs as an action or a state. And verbs can have different tenses. It could be I play, I used to play, I have played, etc. And just to define that point, I am is a verb. That's our state. When we look at verbs, if we get a text and we see, for instance, I play, and we need to write the Spanish for I play, if you go to the dictionary and look up the English term I play, you won't get that in the dictionary. You won't find that term. What you'll find is to play. So the infinitive of a verb is the to form of a verb, and it's the most basic form of the verb that you'll find. And it always translates into English as to. Now in English, we know that a word is an infinitive because it has this to in front of it. In Spanish, however, we have to look at the word the other way around. We have to look at the end first. And in Spanish, we know if a word's an infinitive, the to form, if that word ends in er, or ir. So an example would be jugar, which is to play. If we look up to play in the dictionary, that infinitive, that's the form we get. If I want to say, for instance, I to play football, it doesn't make sense. Or my friends to play volleyball, or my friend to go to Spain. What we have to say is, I play football, my friends play volleyball, I am going to Spain. We have to change that verb so it makes sense. And this process of changing the verb to show who's doing the action is called conjugation. Now, conjugation doesn't just happen in the present tense. For instance, I play, he plays. It can also be in different tenses. It could be he played, she is going to play. So to did, who will do, who is going to do, etc. Now we've spoken about infinitives, the to form of the verb, and we've spoken about conjugation changing the verb. In Spanish, to show who's doing an action, we add different endings to the end of a verb. So we don't look at the front, like we often do in English, where we look at the subject pronoun. We have to look at the end. And to show who's doing an action, we have to add endings to something that we call the stem. And the stem is where we remove the er, the the ir from the infinitive, and that is the building block to which we add our endings. And the last keyword, endings. Now my endings show me who did an action, who is going to do an action, who used to do an action. And endings change depending on who is doing that action. So if it's I, if it's you, if it's he, she, it, we, you plural, or they. And also they also change depending on the tense. So they show us who's doing an action, and they also show us the tense in which it's done, or will be done, or used to be done. And those endings are always laid out in the order of the paradigm. So the endings always follow this paradigm order of I, you singular, he, she, it, we, you plural, they. On the left-hand side of the screen in blue, you have got the English order of the paradigm, I, you, he, she, it, we, you plural, they. Those are the subject pronouns in that order, and you've got the subject pronouns in Spanish on the other side, on the right-hand side, in that order. So yo, tú, él, ella, nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, vosotras, ellos, ellas. Note that in English, we just have the one version, we. In Spanish, that we ending, nosotros, nosotras, depends on the gender. So for instance, if you're saying we and you're a group of girls, you'd use nosotras. And the same with vosotros, vosotras. If you're talking to a group of girls in the you form, you would use vosotras. It's really important just to emphasize is that order never, ever, ever changes. So you might want to pause the video here and spend a few minutes just practicing look, cover, check, just to get that order really embedded into your brain as it does form the basis of everything we're going to do moving forward in this tense, the present tense, and in future tenses. So to practice using the paradigm, what you have got on the left-hand side of the screen is you've got the numbers 1 to 9. You've got some people, or you've got some things such as Ben, Elizabeth, you, talking to one person, Ben, Elizabeth, Elizabeth and I, her car, her dog, his parrot, his cars. Next to it, what you're going to do is you're going to write the subject pronoun that you would use. So for instance, Ben, instead of saying Ben all the time, I could use he. And that means I would use the he-shaped form of the paradigm. What I would like you to do is just pause the video here and write out which form of the paradigm you would use for each one. Be careful if you're looking at Ben and Elizabeth. Think about what you could replace Ben and Elizabeth with to stop repeating Ben and Elizabeth. So instead of saying Ben and Elizabeth go to the park, Ben and Elizabeth play football, Ben and Elizabeth play ice hockey, what could you use to stop repeating their names? Pause the video here while you do this. So let's go through. So number 2, we've got Elizabeth. Again, we're going to use the he, she, it form of the paradigm. Let's not replace Elizabeth with she. You, for one person, because we're talking to one person, it's singular, so we're going to use the you singular form. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more tricky. Ben and Elizabeth, instead of saying Ben and Elizabeth all the time, I can use they. So, for instance, Ben and Elizabeth go to the park. They also play football. Now, with Elizabeth and I can replace Elizabeth and I with we. So that's the form of the paradigm I'm going to use. Her car, we're going to use he, she, it. So her car is new. It was bought in 2022, for instance. Her dog, again, we're going to use the he, she, it form of the verb, form of the paradigm. His parrots, because we've got more than one parrot this time, we're going to use the they form. And his cars, again, we've got more than one car, so we're going to use the they form. So now we've got the paradigm understood, and we know that that order is fixed, it never changes, and that's the order in which our endings come in Spanish. It's time for us to look at the present tense, and we're going to start by looking at the regulars. When we look at tenses, what's really important we do is we always give an example of how that tense translates back into English. So the present tense translates back into English as I travel, I eat, or I live. Okay, so things that are happening now. Now to form the present tense, what we do is we take the infinitive of the verb. And like I said before, the infinitive is that to form. And the infinitive in Spanish we always know because it ends in er, or ir. So in this case here, we've got viajar, to travel. We've got comer, to eat. And we've got vivir, to live. Now we can't say I to travel. We have to say I travel. And this is where we start our process of conjugation. So after we take our infinitive of the verb that we do, we're going to remove the infinitive ending. So we're going to remove the AR, the ER, the IR, and this is going to leave us with our stem. So we've got from viajar, we're going to get viaj. From comer, we're going to get com. From vivir, we're going to get viv. So this is our building block. So once we've got our stem, what we need to do is we need to then add the correct ending. And this ending is added to the stem, and it's based on if the verb is an ER, or an IR verb. So if I want, for instance, I travel, I'm going to look at the ER column because viajar is an ER verb. If I wanted to say we live, then I'm not going to use the er ending because vivir is an ir verb. Therefore, I must use this ir column. And we also have to choose the right ending depending on who is doing the action. So we'll walk through one example together. So we travel. First thing I'm going to do is going to take my infinitive. Now my infinitive of the verb to travel is viajar. And when you're doing this maybe for the first time, it's useful to follow the steps and write it down almost as an equation. So I have my infinitive there. I know it's an infinitive because it ends in AR. The second thing I need to do is I need to remove the infinitive ending, which leaves me with my stem. So my infinitive ending, like we just said, is the AR. So that leaves me with viaj. And the third thing I have to do is I have to choose the correct ending to add based on who is doing the action and if the verb is an AR, ER, or an IR verb. So going back to the original infinitive, I know that my verb is an AR verb because it's viajar. So I'm going to look down first of all, this AR column. And I want we travel, so then I'm going to go to the right form of the paradigm, which for we travel is the we form. And that shows me that the ending that I need to add is amos. So I've got my stem, and I'm going to simply add amos to the end. So we travel is via amos. As easy and as straightforward as that. What you need to do is you need to really take some time to memorize that table, that paradigm table with the present tense. So what I would do is maybe pause the video here and spend some time to go through committing to your memory using look, cover, check, the ER, the ER, and the IR endings for the present tense. So having done that exercise and having committed those endings to memory, hopefully, what I would like you to do now is on the left hand side, you have got some English phrases, such as I shout, he downloads, she sings. You have also got, in brackets, the relevant infinitive that you need to use. What I would like you to do is have a go at conjugating those verbs like we've just shown using the process of taking our infinitive, removing our ER, IR to give us our stem, and adding the right ending to translate into Spanish. What would probably be useful is if you follow the process that I've just shown on there. So you can see I've taken my infinitive, I've got my stem, and then I've finally added the right ending that I need. Pause the video here while you do this. So he downloads, we're going to start with our infinitive, descargar. I'm going to remove that AR to get my stem, so I get descarg. And then he downloads, I'm going to add an A, so I get descarga. For she sings, for cantar, I've got my infinitive, cantar. I'm going to remove the AR to get my stem, which is cant. And for she sings, I'm going to go through and find the right ending, which is canta. For we live, I'm going to start with my infinitive, vivir. Remove the IR to get my stem, which is beep. And the we ending for IR verbs is imos. So sandwich it together, and we get vivimos. They eat. Start with our infinitive, comer. Remove the ER to get our stem, which is com, and add the right ending, which is comen. You plural shall now be careful with this one. It's plural, more than one, so we have to go further down the paradigm. So our infinitive is compartir. Remove the IR to get my stem, which is compart. I'm going to add the right ending, which is compartis. And don't forget that accent. Ben and I write. First thing I'm going to be thinking about this one is what can I replace Ben and I with? And I can replace it with we. And it's really important you follow that step through as that identifies which form of the verb you need to use. So when you use the we form of the verb, I'm going to start with my infinitive, escribir. I'm going to remove the IR to get my stem, which is escrib. And it's Ben and I, we said we're going to use the we ending, so it's going to be escribimos. And again with this next one, Elizabeth and Laura, I'm going to replace Elizabeth and Laura with the pronoun they. So that's the ending I'm going to use. So I'm going to start with beber, my infinitive. I'm going to remove the er to get my stem, which is beb. And the they ending for er verbs is n. So I get beben. We eat from comer. I'm going to start with my infinitive, comer. Remove the er to get my stem, which is com. And the we ending is comemos. They share. Start with my infinitive, compartir. Remove my ir to leave me with my stem, which is compart. And it's the they ending, so I'm going to add comparten. And the last one, we travel. We've got viajar, which is my infinitive. Remove my ending to give me my stem, which is viaj. And we travel, viajamos. Just like that. Once you do this, the more and more you do it, you'll be able to remove that scaffold of working through it like that. You'll be able to get that process ingrained. But it's about getting that process ingrained, and it's about practicing this over and over again and following through those steps really carefully. Now, unfortunately, just like in English, if we think of the case of to be, for instance, we don't say I be, you be, he, she, it be. We say I am, you are, he, she, it is. That's what we call an irregular verb. It doesn't follow the pattern, because if it followed the pattern, it should be I be, you be, he, she, it be. These are called irregulars, and every language has them. And irregulars, unfortunately, are something that you just have to memorize by heart. So you've got to memorize their paradigms by heart. So you've got some key ones there. You've got tener, to have. So I have, you have. Tengo, tienes, tiene. Tenemos, tenéis, tienen. You've got ir, to go. So I go, you go. Voy, vas, va. Vamos, vais, van. Hacer, to make or to do. So I make or I do is hago. You make or you do is haces, hace. Hacemos, hacéis, hacen. You've got ser, to be, and that's to describe character, what somebody's like, their personality, if they're tall, if they're short, more permanent attributes. And that goes soy, eres, es, somos, sois, son. And the last one, estar, to be. And this is more to do with location or something to state. So I am happy right now, but I might be sad later on. So I use estar instead of soy, because if I said soy feliz, that would mean I'm always a happy person. Whereas estoy feliz, that could change. And the conjugation of estar is estoy, estás, está, estamos, estáis, están. And those accents are really, really important that you learn those. So I would pause the video here, spend a little bit of time just practicing those. So moving on, you've got some irregular verbs here. Have a go. Use the previous table if you need to for a little bit of help to conjugate these into Spanish. Pause the video here while you do this. So, going through, he does, hace. She goes, va. We go, vamos. They are, son. You plural are, sois. Ben and I are. So Ben and I, again, we need to think about who we can replace that with. We can replace it with we. So we would say, estamos. Elizabeth and Laura do. Again, think about who you can replace those with. We're going to replace them with they. So it becomes, hacen. We do, hacemos. They go, van. And the last one, we are, somos. So these ones just have to be memorized by heart. So to finish off, pause the video here, see if you can fill in the missing spaces. So we'll go through bit by bit. So the first thing we do is we take the infinitive of the verb, which is viajar, comer, or vivir, which is the to form. We remove our infinitive ending, so the a, r, e, r, I, r, and that leaves us with our stem. And then we add the. correct ending to the stem based on if the verb is an ER verb, if the verb is an ER verb, or if the verb is an IR verb, and also who's doing the action. Our endings, the ER verbs, we have o, as, a, amos, ais, an. The ER verbs, we have o, es, e, emos, eis, en. And for IR verbs, we have o, es, e, imos, is, and en. Please really make sure you learn those accents on the U plural forms. Always goes over the first vowel, so ice, ace, is. So if we have we travel, we're going to take our infinitive, viajar. We're going to remove our infinitive ending, the er, to leave us with our stem, so viaj. And to that stem, we're going to add the right form for we. We know that we're on an er verb, because it's viajar, so I'm going to use this column here. And it's the we form, so we're going to go down to the we form, which is amos. So what we should get is we should get via amos. Hope that's been useful, and hopefully see you again for one of the future tutorials in one of the other tenses.